Hello and welcome to this episode of the Magnetic Woman Show. I'm your host, Lauren Joyce, and I'm really excited for today's episode because this idea came in for me over the last few days, and I just think it's a really important conversation for us to have. So, the title of this episode is In the Era of the Housewives, Be the Nun Podcast. So, let me set this up for you. As you know, I grew up Catholic. I went through 10 years of Catholic school. I mean, in my Catholic school, we had a nun as a principal. We had other nuns coming in and, teaching us. And for a short time, I thought I was going to be a nun. And if you may or may not know, a nun, a Catholic nun, is a woman who takes this like spiritual vow, this vocational vow to um, obviously never get married, never have children, devote her life to the Catholic Church. And within the Catholic Church, there are a variety of different nuns. So they're called different orders. And so each order has their own like philosophy or principles, obviously all under the Catholic Church, but some of them have their different vocations. So, uh, Dominican nuns, for example, I believe, I don't know if all of them are, but there's a heavy emphasis on becoming a teacher. So, you can have like an order of nuns that maybe is the majority of them are nurses or midwives or something like that. So, again, because I grew up Catholic, I'm not Catholic anymore. I'm a Magdalene priestess. And over the last few months in my own spiritual journey, what's been evolving for me is kind of this like boomerang back to Catholicism, not into the theology of Catholicism, but boomeranging back to the red threads. So Catholicism, the original Christianity, um, no, obviously people would say Orthodox. You get the drift. The you get you get it here. Um, when Christianity started, when Catholicism started, it took aspects of goddess-based religions, goddess-based spiritual practices, and wove it into Catholicism. So my quote unquote boomerang back to Catholicism is boomeranging back to the red threads of the goddess and the sacred feminine that were woven into Catholicism. Okay. So, anyways, on my TikTok feed, now look, for better or worse, I spend a lot of time on TikTok. On my TikTok feed, I get a lot of, or a fair amount of like ex-Catholic, cradle Catholic, meaning like you were born into Catholicism, culturally Catholic, humor and la la la. And recently, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago, so I'm scrolling on TikTok, this podcast, like a clip of a podcast comes up, and it's two nuns talking to each other. One nun is interviewing the other one. And at first I was like, oh, good, because that's usually what I do. It's like a big major eye roll when it comes to any patriarchal religion stuff. And I'm watching this interaction between these two women. Now, as a Catholic nun, your title is sister. And usually it's Sister Mary something, usually. It could be sister something. So they're calling each other sister because that's also their title, right? And I'm watching this interaction, and the one is like, Sister, what do you like to do? And she's like, Well, sister, I love this. And I'm like, Okay, there's something about this that I'm really enjoying. And so I start watching a few more clips here and there, and I'm noticing that how these women, how these nuns are talking about their devotional practices, how they're talking about some of their perspectives on their spiritual life. I'm like, if you substituted God and Jesus for the goddess, I sound the same in a lot of ways. And so it really got me thinking about, our paths of devotion and how it makes sense that for a while I thought I was going to be a nun, how a lot of women that I know or work with or who are Magdalene priestesses or witches or mystics either thought they were going to be a nun or used to lead Bible study or maybe desired to be a minister's wife or a pastor's wife because there's this like seed of devotion that has always been there. And when you're younger or when you're raised in patriarchal religion, Christianity, Catholicism, you just point that desire of devotion in the direction that you know, which is Christianity, Catholicism, patriarchal religion. And then as you deconstruct religion and kind of like look at what do you believe and you get onto the path of the sacred feminine, you're like, oh, actually, I'm a priestess. So it all makes sense. So, anyways, I found myself really drawn to this Nuns podcast. Okay. Now, simultaneously, while the Nun, my interest and intrigue with the Nun podcast is occurring, I am seeing clips of the most recent season of Real Housewife of Beverly Hills. Now, I don't love reality TV. I don't hate it. I used to really be into Below Deck. That was my reality TV of choice. And obviously I've seen episodes here and there of Housewives, but I've never really like gotten into the housewife genre. And I don't have any judgment against it, right? So if you're somebody who's like, I love the Housewives, great, amazing. I have friends that like love the Housewives, um, or the Housewives franchise, right? And on this most recent season of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Amanda Francis was on. Now, if you don't know Amanda Francis, she is a digital course creator, a coach, a mentor, and she teaches women specifically about how to energetically and practically bring more money into your life. So she has courses around money, energetics, mindset, spirituality, business. I have been a fan of Amanda's for a long time. I mean, she started her business before I did, but I don't know, just a few years before. So I've known of her. I've for over 10 years. And I've followed her for the majority of that time. And I have always really enjoyed her and her content. I find her to be authentic and I think she puts out incredible work. I have always loved and admired how passionate she is about what she does, how she is just like, this is so amazing. Um, and so as she was on Real Housewife of Beverly Hills, I'm wa seeing clips come up of people calling her a scam artist, calling her a cult leader, like other cast members on the show. And then, of course, you have everybody and their fucking mother giving their opinion of Amanda and how, like, she's awful in this way and what she does is stupid in this way and like all this stuff, right? And it got to the point where I was like, I have to like block a lot of this content because it's really bringing up a lot for me. I don't know Amanda personally. I have friends that do. Um, and I don't, I wouldn't even say I have like a parasocial relationship with her because I don't believe that. But she's always just been a woman who I admire and respected. And so I'm just like, oh my God, this is awful, right? And I'm watching clips of the housewives, especially on Beverly Hills with Amanda, like at dinner and like yelling at each other and like, you're fake and you're a liar and la la la. And, a couple years ago, I did an entire podcast episode called The Housewives and the Rise of the Frenemy. Because for me, you know, I get that it's entertainment and I get that it's quote unquote reality TV. So a lot of it is, while it might not be scripted, there's a lot of stuff that's put in there intentionally for shock value. There's a lot of ways that it's edited as to elicit a really strong emotion from people of like loving and hating certain characters and like going at each other in the comments about how awful this housewife is or how stupid this person is, how they deserve to fail, all that stuff. And it's like when we take a step back and before you go, Lauren, it's not that deep, it's just reality TV. Like, yes and no. Yeah, I think you can watch reality TV and be like, okay, whatever. And I think that in a world, in a society, and especially in a country that is like hell bent on stripping women of our rights, autonomy, and sovereignty, like let's also look at how women are being framed and portrayed in the media. And the Housewives franchise portrays female relationships as frenemies. I'm going to say I'm your friend and talk about you behind your back. I'm going to tell you that we're good friends, and then I'm going to, you know, come into this dinner and say that I think you're a liar and a cheat. I'm going to talk about you to everybody, all the other cast members, about how I think that, you know, you look like an idiot and you're divorced or whatever. And again, it is for entertainment. That's in air quotes. It is for shock value. And it's also you have to look at like who's making money off of this. Like, yes, the women in the cast, but like there's also a lot of men who make money off of the portrayal of women as catty, as like frenemies. And, of course you could argue like, well, a show, a quote unquote reality show of women who just like love and support each other wouldn't do well. Okay, but it's like, why is that? Because we've been so pumped full of this like very polarizing content, media. We've been pumped full of like needing to experience these really strong emotions. We've been conditioned to essentially be addicted to it, to see only that as entertainment. And so, again, as I'm like watching this stuff unfold with Amanda, and I still follow her, so I'm like seeing her post about her experience and things. And like, I saw the one scene where she says, like, I'm not used to being in spaces where people don't know who I am in my heart, and of course they like just so criticized her for that and blah, blah, blah. And I understood what she meant. She meant that she's used to being in a space with really like-minded people who are like, "Oh, wow, like this is the work you do and that's why you do it. That's amazing." She's used to being in spaces that are built upon more true sisterhood, right? So, I'm seeing these clips of the housewives and them, like judging, shaming each other and specifically Amanda. And then the Nun podcast is coming up. And the Nun podcast is, the one main nun who's interviewing the others like, "Okay, sister, what's your favorite hobby?" And then the other nun goes, "I love to cook." And the first nun goes, "And sister, you are so good at that." And that's when I was like, "Oh, that's why I'm loving to watch these clips. Here are these women who are supportive, who recognize each other's genius, who are like gassing each other up." There was one clip of the Nun podcast where, the interviewing nun asked the other one a question and she said something and the first nun goes, "Well, sister, you did go to Harvard. You are so smart." "Oh, thank you, sister. Yes, I did, and just the way those women talk to each other. Now, I think there's a few reasons why there is such a stark difference between the Housewives and the Nun podcast. And let's take out the theology. Okay? So what I mean by that is in Catholicism, in Christianity, in patriarchal religion, when you take a vow of a spiritual life, it is a path of renunciation. You are meant to renounce wealth, right? So like you take a vow of poverty, you're meant to renounce like beauty and vanity. So like in this order of Dominican nuns, they all wear the habit and the same um, frock, I guess, dress. You're meant to be humble and meek and, kind of like, oh, I'm not, you're not meant to like take up a lot of space or take up a lot of attention. Okay. Which that alone is completely opposite to reality TV and the Housewives. So if we take that out of it, right? I think the main reason why these two groups of women are so different and specifically why the nuns have this ability to like, see each other's brilliance and support each other is they are not male centered, right? Now, granted, this kind of overlaps into the theology part where they take a vow of chastity, like they never get married. Um, so they are not vying for patriarchy or male attention or validation. They do not see their status as it relates to like being chosen by a man. Whereas the majority of the housewives, how have they quote unquote made their money? Being chosen by a rich man, often giving up their autonomy and sovereignty in exchange for money. And then, we all know how that goes. You're typically like left in the dust, cheated on, divorced, whatever. And there's this element, again, when you are not male-centered, where true sisterhood gets to live. Now, within, again, the nuns and this, living in this order of nuns, they're not striving for fame. I'm sure they put this out, their podcast out, thinking like maybe this will reach a couple Catholics, and it's taken off. It's become this huge sensation. And there's a lot of women I've noticed in the comments who are like, I love this, and like, yes, sister, yes, and yes, sister, you are so good at that. And again, this is in direct opposition, opposition to how the housewives move, operate, or are portrayed. Now, that said, I think that there gets to be this middle road. And I think that middle road is the sacred feminine. The path of the sacred feminine is a path of reclamation. So while I love the Nun podcast and I find it so peaceful and inspiring, and I'm just like, makes me want to say, yes, sister, and you are so good at that to every woman. The path of the sacred feminine is a path of like reclaiming financial wealth and sovereignty, reclaiming your beauty, sensuality, pleasure, like reclaiming taking up space, being seen, being heard, right? And that, excuse me, hold on, it's not how the nuns operate, right? And because that does not align with their spiritual views and values. So, are there lessons, are there like pieces, aspects of the housewives that we can take and learn from? Absolutely. Taking up space, luxury. Um, but often with the housewives, it's like taking up space, but at what cost? Typically at the cost of somebody else. Like you're taking up space because you're demonizing, criticizing, shaming somebody else. Here at the Magnetic Woman, here in all of my spaces, here on the path of the sacred feminine, it's like you get to take up space, but taking up space is not a zero-sum game. If I take up space, that does not mean that there's not enough space for you. If I take up more space, that doesn't mean that somebody else is robbed. Me taking up space doesn't come at the expense of somebody else, right? And so this is why I created Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, because yes, it's a space where we are cultivating deep and intentional sisterhood, and come in and feel free to say, yes, sister, and you are so good at that. It's also a space where we're learning this like forgotten feminine wisdom, forgotten sacred feminine spiritual leadership. And that again to me where it's like, okay, the nuns took it to this point and now let's take it even further, or let's take it in our own direction. Because again, when it comes to Catholicism, Christianity, any patriarchal religion, I disagree fundamentally, wholeheartedly with 99% of it. Okay. Um, So, you know, in the Nun podcast, when I see clips of them talking about certain scriptures or certain aspects of Catholicism, that's when I scroll. But when I see them talking to each other about their hobbies or like their de own devotional path or even how they decided to become a nun, like why or when they decided to become a nun, like I'm drawn in because I'm like, I resonate with that. Like, yes, yes, and me too. And so I just feel like the patriarchy continues to function. The patriarchy continue it's not thriving, but it continues to go on because of women's often unpaid labor. It continues to go on because it continues to promote an idea of like infighting among women. It continues to center this idea that like other women can't be trusted and that they're your competition. Um, Now, obviously, caveat, can you trust every single woman? No. You know, like you can't trust every single person, you know? So there's that. But this idea that like female friendships are not to be trusted is not only is it false and it's harmful because it is the sisterhood that we see in the Nuns podcast that is what so many women are craving, needing, desiring. And that is what is so supportive for so many women is having that deep kind of sisterhood. So in Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, we meet every other week for um, basically what I call Goddess Church, where we're learning about different mystics, harlots, and heretics, and we do pleasure-based somatic practices. And then throughout our time together, there's also a variety of courses that I will be teaching live in the container. So the path of reclamation, courses around pleasure being sacred, courses around making a lot of money doing your spiritual work, courses around now I'm blanking because this is actually the second time I've recorded this podcast because I recorded it once. And after I was like, oh, I forgot to say some of the really important things. So, and I already did an interview for somebody else's podcast today, so my brain's getting a little mushy here. So we're gonna be wrapping up here in a sec. Um, Anyways, Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, please join us. This Friday is all devoted to Mary Magdalene. Consider this like mystery school meets Goddess Church. It is so, so epic. And it is, in a lot of ways, the antithesis of the Housewives, right? And that idea of fame coming at the cost of other women, the idea of like the frenemy. And so, in the era of the Housewives, be the Nun Podcast. Now, if you haven't seen the Nun Podcast, just go Google it. Like, again, it's so sweet. It's so, and this comes from somebody who rolls her eyes at everything religious. It has been really inspiring and it has really reminded me, right, of the power of being witnessed by another woman in truly the most like beautiful way, right? When these nuns are like, "Yes, sister," and you are so good at that. The end, like they're witnessing each other's genius. They're able to see each other's brilliance without feeling threatened. Now, of course, they're human, so they might feel jealous or they might feel threatened, but like that's not coming through. And I think the other difference, right, clearly is the nuns have their purpose in life is their spiritual path. So they are spiritually filling up every single day, right? Their focus, a main focus of their life is their spirituality, is their connection to God and Jesus for them. And, this isn't like a judgment or a criticism on most of the housewives, but it's like, what is their spiritual practice? What is their devotional practice? I don't know. And that might not be the purpose of their life, and that's fine. But what I have found again and again and again is for so many women who are on the path of the sacred feminine, especially if you don't identify with any kind of Christianity, you don't identify with patriarchal religion at all, there is no temple for us. There is no church. Right? Like, and I know there's a lot of women who are priestesses, witch, mystics themselves. They're like, yeah, I go to church because I don't believe in a lot of the stuff in religion, but I want the community and I want the ritual. That's what mystics, harlots, and heretics is, right? It is meant to be the goddess church, the temple, the regular ritual for us where we're coming and filling up spiritually, right? Where you're coming and being poured into spiritually, because those of us on the path of the sacred feminine, the priestesses, the witches, the mystics, like, because the patriarchy did such, unfortunately, an effective job of eradicating the sacred, not eradicating, suppressing the sacred feminine, pushing it into the shadows, pushing it into the corners, there is no like unbroken line of priestesses, of sacred feminine wisdom. And for many of us, we're the first ones in our lineage, at least that we know of, that is connecting to the sacred feminine in this way. Like, you know how much I would love to have a nonna, which is grandmother in Italian, like a nonna that I learned different like spells from and different aspects of Italian folk magic from. Yes, don't you think I would love to like sit with my Irish grandmother and over tea and scones her teach me different again Celtic practices, rituals? Yes, but that was broken in my lineage, as it was with most of us, especially if you're of European ancestry. And this is what leads to, and I did a whole podcast episode about this already, which you can go check out, about like spiritual colonization and what I hope is well-meaning white women appropriating spiritual practices that are not yours. Um, but because the patriarchy, like, and I think this is the other thing to remember, like, with a lot of places and spaces, different mystery schools, different, like, priestess circles, they're not coming from unbroken lines. It's not like you're tracing this back to the fucking Druids. I remember I wrestled with this for a while where I was like, I consider myself a priestess. I consider myself like self-anointed, but do I need to go to like a priestess training program? And I'm somebody who has always had this like straight A good student mentality and very much like, oh, well, maybe I need to be like maybe I need somebody of authority to tell me, yes, I am a priestess, right? And so like was wrestling with this. What does it mean if I don't do this? Blah, blah, blah. I remember I was looking at this woman who I really loved and I had worked with at one point. I was like, maybe I should do her mystery school because that will make me legitimate, right? That'll give me the authority. And I was like, okay, let me read about it. So I was like reading about it and it talks about the woman who started it. And it was a woman who started it like in the early 90s in Northern California. And I was like, wow. I just had this like unconscious assumption that this was some unbroken line. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It was created by a woman and she, beautifully took a bunch of different things together and created this mystery school. But this is not some, again, unbroken line past Christianity, past Catholicism, all the way back to Cleopatra and it's like, no, no. And unfortunately, we don't have that. Now, there may be places and spaces that do, and there might be lineages and specific ancestral practices that do have an unbroken line. And I think that is amazing. And for those of us who don't come from those communities or spiritual lineages, there is a deep ache and a gnawing hunger for a goddess church, for a space where we're meeting in community and in ritual, where you're not just like filling up spiritually, but you're also learning. Like I saw that at Beltane, there was one, I follow a bunch of different like sacred feminine things and spaces. Somebody was hosting like a community Beltane ritual, and I was like, amazing. And I went. I stayed for like 15 minutes and I left. It was so fucking boring to me. I was like, if I have to put my hand on my heart one more time and like, let's call on the wind. And I'm like, let's get some fucking dancing going. Let's get some hip circles going. Let's get some pleasure here. Let's get some fun. That is why it's mystics, harlots, and heretics. The harlots, yes, the women who have been labeled harlots who were not, like Mary Magdalene, and the actual harlots, like the courtesans, are as revered, respected, and we are as devoted to as we are Isis, Aphrodite, Mary Magdalene, Thecla, other mystics. This We have been missing this for 2000 years. Now, is this the answer? Like, end all be all? It's mystics, harlots, and heretics or nothing? No. Are there other spaces that you might find that you're like, actually, that fills that space for me? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's fucking amazing. And I think there's not enough spaces like that. So this is the space that I am creating. So I would love to have you join me, Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics. So you can go below into the show notes or themagneticwoman.com/forbidden and join us. When you join before Friday, there's some bonuses. When you pay in full before Friday, you get an in-person VIP day with me as a bonus, which is more like worth more than like it's worth almost double the year membership. In order to join Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, you have to commit to a minimum of 6 months. So there is a monthly payment plan option, but you have to join us for 6 months because the path of the sacred feminine is not a wham bam thank you ma'am. It is not a one and done. It is not you come to one ritual and it changes your fucking life. This, my love, is the path of continual becoming. It is the path of your life. Like this is your lifelong devotional path. So why would you like just join for a month? Like that's stupid. So anyways, I hope you'll join us. If you get a chance, check out the Nun podcast. I think it's amazing and just like so sweet and such a great reminder. And I think that the more and more we are in community with each other in a way where we're truly supporting each other, where we're truly seeing the brilliance in other women, and where it is very clear that it's not a zero-sum game for success, space, visibility, wealth, whatever, the more we are going to change the world. So, with that, I need to get off because I am like fading very fast. I love you. I'll see you next time.